Rain pounded the dimly lit streets of Millfield. As Michael Davidson hurried home, collar turned up against the bitter wind. That's when he heard it, a muffled cry from the shadowed alley. He should have kept walking. A 30-year history of minding his own business had served him well. Instead, he hesitated, then turned. There she was, a pregnant woman, her face bruised, hands protectively cradling her swollen belly. Behind her, a man paced, fists clenched, rage emanating from him like heat. Their eyes met, hers pleading, his threatening. In that moment, something long dormant awakened in Michael. But could one ordinary man really stand against such calculated cruelty? Would his intervention save 2 lives or cost him his own? The alarm blared at precisely 6:15 a.m., as it had for the past 23 years. Michael Davidson's hand reached out, finding the worn leather briefcase beside his bed before silencing the intrusion. A ritual check, wallet, keys, reading glasses, all present. But this morning, his fingers trembled slightly, memories of last night's rain-soaked encounter still fresh. He shuffled to the bathroom, avoiding his reflection. At 54, Michael had mastered invisibility, head down at the office, polite nods to neighbors, phone calls with his ex-wife Karen, limited to necessary logistics. The divorce papers, finalized 3 years ago, had described their marriage as irreconcilably broken. The truth was far more mundane. They had simply stopped seeing each other, becoming furniture in each other's lives. "Dad, you never took a stand on anything," his daughter Ellie had said during their last argument. 2 years of silence followed. Now her wedding invitation sat unopened on his kitchen counter, a silent reproach. Michael pulled a grey tie from the rack, identical to the 6 others beside it. Accountants weren't meant to be noticed. Blending in had become both his professional talent and personal philosophy. The morning news droned as he measured coffee grounds precisely. Another domestic violence incident turned fatal, the anchor reported dispassionately. Michael's hand froze mid-scoop. That woman from the alley, her eyes haunted him. Had he done enough? Anything? His briefcase, a graduation gift from his father 30 years ago, sat by the door. Inside, calculator, spreadsheets, half-completed tax forms, tools of a life spent tallying others' fortunes while his own remained safely uncounted. Outside his apartment window, Millfield awakened. The corner bakery unleashed the scent of fresh bread. The bus collected sleepy-eyed students. Michael had chosen this neighborhood for its predictable rhythms, its comforting sameness. Yet today, everything seemed sharper, as if he'd been seeing through gauze all these years. The phone rang, unusual for this hour. His boss, Harold. "Davidson, you're never late. Everything all right?" Michael checked his watch, 7:40. For the first time in decades, he had lost track of time. "Just feeling a bit under the weather," he lied, surprised at how easily it came. "Take the day if needed. Peterson account can wait until tomorrow." Michael thanked him and hung up, standing disoriented in his own kitchen. A free day. The concept was foreign, almost frightening. His mind returned to the alley, the pregnant woman's bruised cheek, her protective hands cradling her belly, her whispered pleas before he stepped between her and the looming husband. What had happened after he walked her to the all-night diner, after she refused his suggestion to call the police, after he had left her there with $20 and his business card? The briefcase caught his eye, its leather scuffed where he'd used it to block a punch from the enraged husband. Evidence of the one moment in decades when Michael Davidson had not walked away, had not minded his own business. His apartment suddenly felt suffocating, every object a reminder of careful choices that added up to a life of comfortable non-existence. The framed accounting certificate, the alphabetized bookshelf, the single-place setting by the sink. Michael picked up his phone, scrolling to find a number he'd never used. Dr. Mitchell, the therapist Karen had insisted he see during their separation. "You need to figure out why you never engage, Michael," she had said. He had attended one session, nodded politely, and never returned. His finger hovered over the call button when a text message appeared from an unknown number. "This is Sarah from last night. I need help. He's found me." Michael stared at the words, feeling his carefully constructed world begin to crumble. The briefcase sat by the door, his father's voice echoing from decades past. "Security, son. That's what matters in the end." But for the first time, Michael wondered if his father had been wrong. Sarah Miller winced as she applied concealer to her darkening eye. The prepaid phone, hidden in a box of feminine products Victor would never touch, buzzed softly. Another message from the domestic violence hotline. Meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m., safe place. 6 months pregnant, she no longer recognized her reflection. Before Victor, she had been a kindergarten teacher with an easy laugh. Now she calculated each word, each movement, measuring potential triggers like an expert chemist. The baby kicked, a reassuring flutter. "We'll get out," she whispered. "I promise." The promise felt hollow. She had made it before. 3 escape attempts in 2 years of marriage. Each time, Victor had found her. Each time, the punishment had escalated. The bathroom door rattled. "You've been in there 20 minutes." Victor's voice deceptively calm. The most dangerous version of him. "Morning sickness," she called back, quickly hiding the phone. "I'll be right out." She opened the door to find him leaning against the wall, scrolling through her regular phone. His customs officer uniform pressed and ready, service weapon already holstered on his hip. His colleagues at the border called him meticulous, dedicated, a credit to the department. "You texted your sister yesterday." "Not a question." Sarah nodded carefully. "Just about the baby. She wanted to know if we'd picked names." Victor studied her face, searching for lies. "What else?" "Nothing, I swear." He handed back the phone. "You know I only check because I worry. So many people would take advantage of someone as trusting as you." His hand brushed her stomach. "I need to protect both of you." Sarah nodded, the practiced response. This morning Victor was in his benevolent protector mode, almost more frightening than his rage. It meant guilt was coming, then gifts, then the inevitable explosion. After Victor left for work, Sarah retrieved the hidden phone. The stranger from last night, Michael, had given her his business card. An accountant. Ordinary, safe-looking. She had almost dismissed his help, but something in his eyes, recognition perhaps, had made her take the card. She hadn't planned to contact him. What could an accountant do against Victor, who had friends throughout local law enforcement, who knew how to hurt without leaving marks, who had promised to take their child if she ever left again? But this morning's conversation had changed everything. Victor had mentioned too casually a transfer request to a remote border station in North Dakota. Fresh start, he called it. Sarah understood the strategy. Isolation, her final tether to the outside world, severed. The last escape attempt had been 8 months ago, before the pregnancy. Victor had found her at her mother's house in Cincinnati. The accident that followed put her in the hospital with a broken wrist. When they discovered she was pregnant, Victor had transformed temporarily, attentive, remorseful, jubilant about fatherhood. Sarah touched her stomach. This baby complicated everything and clarified everything. She couldn't raise a child in fear, couldn't let her baby grow up walking on eggshells, learning that love and control were synonymous. The hidden phone felt warm in her palm. The stranger, Michael, had seemed so out of place in that alley. His attempt to intervene had been awkward, almost comical initially. He'd raised his umbrella like a shield, voice shaking as he told Victor to back away. But he had stayed, even after Victor's first threatening step forward, had placed himself between them with stubborn, terrified resolve. Their conversation at the all-night diner had been brief. Michael had offered money for a hotel, suggested police. Sarah had explained, with practiced weariness, why none of that would work. He hadn't argued, just listened with growing comprehension. Then he'd left his card with a simply stated, "If you need anything." From her bedroom window, Sarah could see the alley where Victor had caught her trying to leave last night. She had packed a small bag, called a rideshare. So close, Victor's shift had ended early. The hidden phone, her tiny lifeline, felt insufficient against the coming storm. North Dakota meant disappearing completely. Sarah began typing. "This is Sarah from last night. I need help. He's found me." She hesitated over the send button, then added, "I'm pregnant. He's planning to take me away in 3 days." The rain had been relentless that night, drumming against Michael's umbrella as he cut through the alley. A shortcut he rarely took. That's when he heard it, a sharp cry followed by a thud against the brick wall. "Please, Victor, the baby." A woman's voice, tight with fear. Michael froze, instinct urging him to hurry past. Not his business, not his problem. Then came the sound of another impact and a muffled sob. Before conscious thought could intervene, Michael found himself stepping around the dumpster. There they were, The woman pressed against the wall, one hand protecting her visibly pregnant belly, the other raised defensively. Facing her, a broad-shouldered man with a military haircut, his back to Michael. "You think you can just leave?" the man hissed. "After everything I've done for you?" Michael's umbrella suddenly felt ridiculous in his hand, a flimsy shield against the storm brewing before him. Yet when the man raised his hand again, Michael heard himself speak. "Stop!" His voice sounded foreign, unrecognizable. The man, Victor, turned slowly, surprise giving way to contempt as he assessed Michael's rain-soaked sweater vest and dress shoes. "Walk away, old man." "Family matter," Michael should have. Every survival instinct screamed retreat. Instead, his eyes met the woman's, wide, desperate, a silent plea within them. "She's pregnant," Michael said, as if this self-evident fact might trigger some dormant decency. Victor's laugh was ugly, very observant. "Now mind your own damn business before you get hurt." The broken umbrella wasn't a conscious decision. As Victor turned back toward the woman, Michael found himself thrusting the umbrella's metal shaft between them. Not a weapon, merely an obstacle, an extension of his suddenly resolute presence. Victor's expression shifted from annoyance to rage. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." The first punch caught Michael's shoulder, sending pain radiating down his arm. The second he blocked awkwardly with his briefcase. The third never landed because the woman suddenly darted forward, grabbing Victor's jacket. "The patrol car," she gasped, nodding toward the street. "Someone called them." Victor hesitated, eyes darting toward the alley entrance. No flashing lights were visible, but the possibility was enough. He jabbed a finger toward the woman. "This isn't over." "Sarah, you know I'll find you." With a final glare at Michael, Victor backed away, disappearing into the rainy night. The silence that followed seemed louder than the confrontation. Michael stood motionless, umbrella broken and dangling, rain soaking through his clothes. "Are you hurt?" he finally managed. The woman, Sarah, shook her head, though the bruise forming on her cheek suggested otherwise. "Thank you," she whispered, "but you shouldn't have done that. He's connected." "We should call the police," Michael suggested, already reaching for his phone. Sarah's bitter laugh stopped him. "He is the police, or close enough. Customs officer. Have the department at his poker games." She glanced nervously toward where Victor had disappeared. "I need to go before he comes back. Do you have somewhere safe?" Another laugh, this one breaking on a sob. "If I did, I wouldn't be here." The next moments unfolded with dreamlike quality. Michael offering his card, suggesting a 24-hour diner several blocks away, giving her what cash he had. Sarah's reluctance, then acceptance. The awkward walk through rain-slick streets, neither speaking, both glancing repeatedly over their shoulders. At the diner, beneath harsh fluorescent lighting, Sarah looked even more vulnerable, early 30s, dark circles under intelligent eyes, a practiced wariness in every movement. "He'll kill me if he finds me again," she said matter-of-factly, stirring untouched coffee. "Maybe not today, maybe not obviously, but eventually." Michael, dabbing at his sodden shirt with paper napkins, felt wholly inadequate. "There must be shelters, resources." "I've tried." Her voice was flat. 3 times. "He has friends everywhere." When Michael left her at the diner, he'd felt both relief and gnawing guilt. He'd done something, certainly, but not enough. Never enough. Now, staring at her text message the next morning, Michael realized with startling clarity that his intervention hadn't ended in that alley. It had only just begun. "It's not much," Michael said, fumbling with the spare room key. The lock had grown stiff from disuse, much like Michael himself. "But it's quiet, safe." Sarah stood in the hallway of his apartment, clutching a hastily packed duffel bag, eyes constantly darting to the elevator down the hall. The bruise on her cheekbone had darkened to a deep purple, a stark contrast against her pale skin. "You really don't have to do this," she said. Not for the first time since he had picked her up outside the bus station. "I can find a hotel." Michael finally worked the lock open. "With what money?" "Besides, hotels require ID, credit cards." He pushed the door wide, revealing a room filled with cardboard boxes and a twin bed with a bare mattress. "My daughter's old room," he explained. "She took most of her things when she moved out." Sarah stepped inside hesitantly. "Your daughter won't mind?" A shadow crossed Michael's face. "Ellie hasn't been here in 2 years." He moved toward a linen closet in the hall. "Let me get you some sheets." As Michael made up the bed, Sarah stood by the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. "He'll check the shelters first," she murmured, more to herself than Michael. "Then my sister's, though I haven't spoken to her in months." Michael smoothed the comforter, domestic movements that felt strange after years of tending only to himself. "You said he works for the Border Patrol?" Sarah nodded. "Customs and Border Protection. He can track people, Michael. It's what he does." She absently touched her stomach. "He's resourceful, connected, and right now very, very angry." The spare key lay heavy in Michael's palm as he placed it on the nightstand. It represented something he hadn't offered anyone in years: access to his space, his life, trust. "No one knows you're here," he said. "You can stay until we figure something out." The "we" surprised them both. Sarah sank onto the edge of the bed, sudden exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me." It was the question Michael had been asking himself since receiving her text. Why risk his orderly life for a stranger's crisis? He thought of his ex-wife's accusation. "You care more about your routine than actual people, Michael." Of his daughter's frustration. "You never take a stand on anything." "Because you needed help," he said finally, the simplicity of the answer surprising him. "And I was there." That first evening established their cautious choreography, Sarah emerging briefly from the spare room for meals, Michael working late at his dining table. Minimal conversation, each orbit carefully calculated to avoid collision. By the second day, necessity dissolved some barriers. Sarah needed prenatal vitamins. Michael had to explain her presence to Mrs. Abernathy next door, who had glimpsed her through the window. They sat at opposite ends of the sofa, planning. "He'll check my credit cards, phone records," Sarah explained. "He'll interview my co-workers, my doctor." Michael found himself admiring her methodical assessment, the teacher in her organizing chaos into manageable lessons. "What about your parents?" "Both gone. Cancer took Mom last year. Dad's been out of the picture since I was 8. She twisted a loose thread on her sleeve. "Victor, he seemed so stable at first. After Mom died, that stability was everything." On the 3rd morning, Michael returned from the pharmacy to find Sarah sitting at his kitchen table, surrounded by spreadsheets, his work papers from the previous night. "I'm sorry," she said, quickly gathering them. "I was a math major before switching to education. Numbers are comforting." Instead of the intrusion he would normally feel, Michael experienced a strange resonance. "I understand that." That afternoon, he returned early from the office to find Sarah asleep on the couch, a book of baby names open beside her. He covered her with a throw blanket, the domestic gesture coming more naturally now. As he moved away, her hand caught his wrist. "Thank you," she murmured, still half asleep. "For the key. For everything." Looking down at her, Michael recognized an unfamiliar feeling expanding in his chest. Purpose. For the first time in decades, his actions mattered beyond spreadsheets and quarterly reports. Someone's life, 2 lives, might depend on choices he made. It terrified him. And more surprisingly, it awakened him. Victor Miller rolled Sarah's wedding ring between his fingers. The simple gold band, catching the harsh fluorescent light of the Customs and Border Protection break room. 4 days since she'd disappeared. 4 days of mounting rage beneath his carefully maintained exterior. Still no word from the wife? Officer Jennings asked, dropping into the chair opposite, unwrapping a sandwich. Victor slipped the ring into his pocket. "Just morning sickness. She's resting at her sister's." The lie came easily after years of practice. No one at work knew about the arguments, the discipline he sometimes needed to administer. They saw only the devoted husband, excited about his first child, putting in overtime for a better future. "Patterson wants those interdiction reports by end of shift," Jennings mumbled through a mouthful of food. Victor nodded, face betraying nothing of the storm within. Sarah had never stayed gone this long. Previous attempts had lasted hours, perhaps a day. Her sister's house, a college friend's apartment, predictable havens easily monitored. This time was different. The bus station security footage showed her boarding the 5:15 to Cincinnati, but his sister-in-law swore Sarah never arrived. More troubling was the stranger from the alley, the accountant who had interfered. Victor had run his license plate, an easy matter with his database access. Michael Davidson, divorced, no criminal record, lived alone in an apartment downtown, worked at Millfield Financial Services for 20-plus years, the most ordinary man imaginable. Yet something about him nagged at Victor, the way he had stepped between them, afraid but resolute. Unlike the neighbors who heard arguments but turned up their televisions. Unlike Sarah's colleagues who noticed bruises but accepted explanations of clumsiness, Victor's phone vibrated. A text from Ramirez at Millfield PD. Davidson called in sick again today. Third day straight. The coincidence was too perfect. Victor crushed his empty coffee cup, plastic cracking between his fingers. "Everything okay?" Jennings asked. Victor smoothed his expression. "Fine. Need to check something." In his patrol car, Victor studied the surveillance photos Ramirez had sent, grainy images from the bank across from Davidson's apartment building. No sign of Sarah entering or exiting, but the service entrance wasn't covered by cameras. He scrolled through Sarah's recent call logs. Access to her regular phone was simple. He had installed monitoring software months ago. Nothing suspicious, but he knew about the prepaid phone. He had found the receipt while checking her purse, had been waiting for her to use it to provide final proof of her betrayal. Victor touched the wedding ring in his pocket. He had given it to her 5 years ago, when she was still teaching kindergarten, still laughed easily, still looked at him with admiration rather than fear. He had promised to protect her then, from a world full of men who would use and discard her. "You belong to me now," he had whispered during their first dance. She had smiled, taking it as romance rather than declaration. Victor started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. He wasn't scheduled to patrol today, but no one would question him. Being born into a family of border officers had its privileges. Cousins, uncles, his father before retirement. A network of loyal men who understood that sometimes rules needed flexibility. He drove past Davidson's apartment building twice, noting the accountant's sedan in its assigned spot. Confirmation. On the third pass, he parked down the block and waited, patience honed through years of border surveillance. As dusk fell, a neighbor entered the building, elderly female, arms full of groceries. Victor noted the security door closing slowly behind her, its automatic mechanism delayed. A vulnerability. His phone buzzed with a text from Ramirez. Davidson ordered prenatal vitamins. Delivered today, final confirmation. The rage Victor had been containing burst its careful boundaries, flooding his system with cold clarity. Sarah had not only run, she had allied herself with the stranger, brought another man into their private war. Victor touched his service weapon, then his backup piece strapped to his ankle. Then, reconsidering, he opened the glove compartment and removed a knife untraceable, purchased at a gun show years ago. This would require subtlety care. A disappearance rather than an obvious crime. "I'm coming for you, Sarah," he whispered to the darkening street. "Both of you." He tucked the wedding ring back into his pocket. She would wear it again once she understood her lesson. Once the baby was born. Once the accountant was removed from the equation. After all, families belonged together. Victor would make sure of it. The first aid kit sat open on the bathroom counter, its contents neatly arranged in rows. Antiseptic wipes, bandages, antibiotic ointment. Sarah dabbed at the cut on Michael's forehead, her touch gentle but efficient. "I still think we should go to the hospital," she said, pressing a clean gauze pad against the wound. Michael winced. "And tell them what? That I walked into a door? That would be ironic," Sarah replied, a hint of dark humor in her voice. "That's what I always told them." The fall had been stupid, a middle-of-the-night trip to the kitchen, a forgotten stack of books on the floor. Michael had caught his head on the corner of the coffee table, the crash awakening Sarah. Now at 3 a.m., they sat in the bathroom's unflattering light. Closer than they had been in the 5 days since she arrived. My father was a drinker, Michael said suddenly, surprising himself. Not violent, just absent even when present. Sarah's hands paused briefly before continuing their work. My dad left when I was 8. Mom raised me alone. Is that why you stayed? With Victor? The question had been building for days. Sarah secured the bandage with medical tape. Partly. She began returning items to the kit, organizing with careful precision. When we met, Victor was charming, protective, said he'd never leave like my father did. A bitter smile crossed her face. He certainly kept that promise. Michael touched the bandage gently. How did it change? Gradually. After we married, he began checking things. My receipts, my schedule, my friends. She closed the kit with a soft click. By the time I realized what was happening, I was isolated, dependent. Then I got pregnant, and I hoped it would get better. But it got worse, Michael finished. Sarah nodded, looking suddenly exhausted. Your turn. Why did your marriage end? In the small bathroom, the question had nowhere to hide. Karen said I was emotionally unavailable, that I cared more about order than connection. He attempted a self-deprecating smile. She wasn't wrong. And your daughter? Ellie wanted me to fight for the marriage. When I couldn't, she took it as confirmation that I didn't care enough. Michael rubbed his temples. 2 years of silence since. Sarah placed the first aid kit under the sink. Yet here you are, risking everything for a stranger. Maybe I'm trying to get it right this time. The unplanned honesty hung between them. Sarah broke the silence first. Tomorrow's my prenatal checkup. I should cancel. No, Michael said firmly. You need proper care. We'll figure something out. They moved to the kitchen where Michael made tea, another new habit in a life suddenly full of them. Late-night conversations had become their routine, the darkness making confessions easier. I was a kindergarten teacher, Sarah said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. I loved it. The children, their openness. What happened? Victor happened. Said a pregnant wife of his shouldn't be working. That he'd provide everything we needed. She stared into her tea. I gave notice last month. Michael nodded, understanding the incremental surrenders that could dismantle a life. I wanted to be an architect, he offered. Designed buildings in my head since childhood. But my father said accounting was practical, secure. Why didn't you switch later, after he was gone? The question was gentle but direct, like Sarah herself. Inertia, Michael admitted. Fear. Years pass, and suddenly changing feels impossible. Sarah's hand moved across the table, stopping just short of his. Yet here you are, harboring a fugitive wife. The absurdity of their situation hit them simultaneously, an accountant and a kindergarten teacher against a man with a badge, a gun and institutional power. Their laughter, though quiet, felt like the first real thing in Michael's apartment in years. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was stronger. I need to disappear completely. New identity, new state. She looked up, meeting his eyes. I know people who can help, a network for women like me. I made contact today. Michael felt an unexpected hollowness at the thought of her leaving. When? 2 days. They have a place in Seattle. Medical care for the baby. She hesitated. I'll need money for new documents. I can pay you back someday. Done, he said without hesitation. Whatever you need. In the refrigerator light's glow, they were no longer strangers, just 2 people rebuilding what others had broken. Different damages, similar repairs. Try to sleep, Sarah said, touching his bandaged head lightly. We both need rest. As they moved toward their separate rooms, Michael realized the apartment no longer felt empty. For the first time in years, his house contained something worth protecting. The neighborhood watch flyer fluttered on the bulletin board of Thompson's grocery. See something, say something, emblazoned across the top. Michael hardly noticed it as he carefully selected prenatal vitamins, his fingers tracing the labels with unfamiliar concern. Behind him, an elderly woman examined cantaloupes, her curious gaze occasionally drifting his way. Second aisle. By the pharmacy. Sarah's voice directed through his earpiece, a precaution they had agreed upon for this necessary risk. She waited in the car, sunglasses and a baseball cap disguising her appearance, giving instructions based on a list they had prepared together. Folic acid, Michael muttered, scanning shelves. Already in the prenatal vitamins, she replied. Get calcium supplements too. Michael reached for the bottle, then froze. A reflection in the security mirror revealed a man in a dark uniform entering the store. Broad-shouldered military haircut. The grocery bags nearly slipped from Michael's suddenly damp hands. Victor just walked in, he whispered, turning his face toward the shelving. Don't panic. Stay in the car. Through the earpiece came the sound of Sarah's sharp intake of breath. Is he looking for us? I don't think so. He's at the counter. Michael risked a glance. Victor stood at the register, showing something to the cashier. A photo, Michael realized, with a cold jolt. The cashier shook her head, but pointed toward the pharmacy section. He's asking about you. About us? Michael abandoned the shopping cart, moving casually toward the rear exit. I'm coming out the back. Start the car. Sir? The elderly woman with the cantaloupes was suddenly beside him. Aren't you Michael Davidson from the Millfield Accounting Society? I believe we met at last year's charity dinner. Michael's mind raced. Mrs. Abernathy's bridge partner. I'm sorry, you must be mistaken. Davidson. Victor's voice cut through the store. He turned from the register, eyes scanning the aisles. Michael ducked behind a display, heart hammering against his ribs. The rear exit was only 20 feet away, past the dairy section. He moved quickly, keeping his head down. Sir, you forgot your vitamins. The elderly woman's voice echoed through the store. Michael didn't look back, pushing through the emergency exit, triggering an alarm that screamed into the afternoon air. Sarah already had the car running, her face pale beneath the cap. Go, go! Michael gasped, throwing himself into the passenger seat. As they pulled away, Michael glimpsed Victor bursting through the exit, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition to cold rage. Their eyes met for a split second before Sarah accelerated around the corner. He saw us. Sarah's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. He saw you. Keep driving, Michael said, struggling to control his breathing. Natural speed. Don't draw attention. They took a circuitous route home, checking repeatedly for tails. The apartment, when they finally reached it, felt immediately different. No longer a sanctuary, but a target. We need to leave, Sarah said, pacing the living room. Tonight, Michael agreed, already mentally cataloguing what they could pack, what funds he could access quickly. His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Abernathy next door. A police officer was asking about you. Showed me a picture of a pregnant woman. Is everything all right? Michael showed the message to Sarah, whose face drained of color. He'll be here within the hour, she whispered. The knock, when it came, was gentle, almost friendly. They froze, hardly breathing, until a paper slid under the door. Michael retrieved it cautiously. Neighborhood watch alert. Report suspicious activity, it read, with a photo of Sarah Graney, but recognizable beneath. Pregnant woman, possibly in danger, maybe with this man. Michael's driver's license photo stared back at him, the word accomplice stamped across it in red. He's turning the neighborhood against us, Sarah whispered, making it impossible to hide. Michael pulled the blinds shut, mind racing. We need somewhere he won't think to look. Somewhere not connected to either of us. Sarah sank onto the couch, hands protectively covering her belly. The network contact isn't ready for me yet. 2 more days. Michael made a decision. I know a place. My ex-father-in-law's cabin. 3 hours north in the mountains. Karen and I were the only ones who used it, and she hasn't been there since the divorce. Will she tell Victor if he contacts her? She might, but she doesn't know I still have the key. Michael moved to his closet, retrieving a small fireproof box from the top shelf. We leave in 20 minutes. Pack only what you absolutely need. As Sarah hurried to gather her things, Michael noticed the neighborhood watch flyer again. The irony wasn't lost on him. A system designed to protect the vulnerable, now weaponized against them. Neighbors becoming unwitting informants in a hunt where the predator wore a badge. Outside, thunder rumbled, another storm approaching. Michael hoped it would cover their tracks. The old road map crinkled as Michael spread it across the dashboard. The highway lines faded from years of use. GPS was too easily tracked, another lesson in their crash course on disappearing. Take the next exit, he instructed, tracing the route with his finger. There's a state road that runs parallel. Longer, but less monitored. Rain pelted the windshield as Sarah navigated the unfamiliar turns. They had switched vehicles an hour ago. Michael's sedan, abandoned at a bus station, replaced by a 10-year-old Subaru, borrowed from his one friend who wouldn't ask questions. A former client who owed him for some creative accounting during an audit. How are you feeling? Michael asked, noting Sarah's tightened grip on the steering wheel. I'm fine, she said automatically, then amended, my back hurts. Doctor said that's normal at 6 months. The doctor's appointment they'd missed weighed on both of them. Sarah needed proper prenatal care, especially now. There's a clinic in Riverdale, Michael said, pointing to a small town on the map. We could stop there tomorrow. Sarah nodded, then suddenly grimaced, her hand moving to her side. What is it? Michael asked, alarmed. Just Braxton Hicks contractions. False labor. She attempted a reassuring smile. But maybe I should let you drive for a while. They pulled into an abandoned gas station, switching places as rain drummed on the roof. Sarah settled into the passenger seat with visible relief, her face pale in the dashboard light. Tell me about the cabin, she said, as Michael pulled back onto the road, clearly trying to distract herself. It's basic. 2 bedrooms, a fireplace, no internet, spotty cell service. Karen's father was a survivalist type, wanted a place off the grid. Sounds perfect, Michael nodded. We used it maybe twice a year, fishing in summer, snowshoeing in winter. Karen loved it there. He paused. I always felt trapped, and now you're willingly isolating yourself, Sarah observed. With a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore, Michael said quietly. They drove in silence for several miles, the wipers keeping rhythmic time. Sarah dozed beside him, one hand resting on her belly. At a gas station just before the mountain roads began, Michael filled the tank and bought supplies. Enough food for several days, extra batteries, first aid supplies. Cash only, cap pulled low over his face. When he returned to the car, Sarah was awake, scrolling through her hidden phone with a troubled expression. What is it? Michael asked, passing her a bottle of water. Message from my contact in the network. There's a problem with the Seattle arrangement. Sarah looked up, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Victor's showing my photo at bus stations along the west coast. They think he's figured out my escape route. How could he know? He's in law enforcement, Michael. They talk to each other, share information. She locked the phone. The network's suggesting we change plans, maybe head east instead. But that means starting over with the arrangements. Michael studied the map, mind racing. How long do we need to hide? Until I deliver, at minimum. 7 to 8 more weeks. Sarah's voice wavered slightly. I can't have this baby while looking over my shoulder. I can't let Victor get custody. Michael traced a new route on the map. The cabin should buy us time to think. It's registered in my former father-in-law's name, Gerald Hammond. Victor would have to dig deep to make that connection. As they wound into the mountains, the storm intensified. Lightning illuminated the forest in stark flashes, thunder following almost immediately. The road narrowed, switchbacks becoming treacherous in the downpour. There, Michael pointed to a nearly invisible turnoff. That's the access road. The Subaru struggled up the muddy path, tires slipping in the increasingly slick conditions. After 20 minutes of slow progress, a small cabin appeared, dark against the storm-tossed pines. We made it, Michael said, relief evident in his voice. As they gathered their meager belongings from the car, Sarah suddenly doubled over, a gasp escaping her lips. Sarah? Michael was at her side instantly, supporting her weight. It's nothing, she insisted, but her face betrayed her. Just more Braxton Hicks. Let's get you inside, Michael said, concern mounting as he noted the rigidity of her abdomen under his supporting arm. This seemed different from the earlier discomfort. In the cabin, Michael quickly started a fire in the old stone fireplace. Sarah sank onto the worn couch, arms wrapped around herself. It's too early, she whispered. The baby can't come yet. Michael knelt beside her, the reality of their isolation suddenly stark. No doctor, no hospital. Just an accountant and a kindergarten teacher, 90 minutes from the nearest town. with a possibly premature baby threatening to arrive. The old road map lay forgotten on the coffee table, their route marked in pencil, a thin line through wilderness, away from one danger and potentially toward another. Dawn illuminated the dusty family photo album that Michael had discovered on a shelf behind fishing tackle and old field guides. Faded images of Karen's family, her father Gerald grinning beside trophy trout, her mother Emily in hiking gear, filled the pages. Happier times preserved behind plastic sheets. Who's this? Sarah asked softly, appearing behind him. She had finally managed to sleep for a few hours, the false labor pains subsiding. Michael pointed to a stern-faced older man in a flannel shirt. Gerald Hammond, Karen's father, built this place with his own hands, according to family legend. Sarah settled into a chair, wrapping herself in a quilt found in the bedroom closet. He looks formidable, he was. Vietnam vet. Suspicious of government technology, most people. Michael turned a page. But he loved Karen fiercely. After Emily died, it was just the two of them until Karen met me. He didn't approve. Accountants weren't his idea of worthy sons-in-law. Michael smiled faintly. Too soft, too conventional. Sarah studied a wedding photo, younger versions of Michael and Karen, with Gerald standing stiffly beside them. What happened to him? Heart attack, 5 years ago. Karen inherited the cabin, but we rarely came after that. Michael closed the album. She found it too painful. The cabin kitchen was basic but functional. Michael prepared instant coffee, while Sarah examined the supplies they'd brought, calculating how long they could stay before needing to venture out. "The contractions have stopped," she said, answering Michael's unasked question. "It was probably just stress. Still, we should find a doctor." Sarah shook her head firmly. "Too risky. Victor will check medical facilities." A knock at the door froze them both. Michael motioned Sarah toward the bedroom, grabbing a heavy flashlight, the only potential weapon at hand. "Who is it?" he called, approaching cautiously. "Eleanor Whitman," came a woman's voice. "From the network, Sarah contacted us." Michael and Sarah exchanged glances. Sarah nodded cautiously, recognizing the name. The woman who entered was in her 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing hiking boots and carrying a medical bag. Behind her came a younger man with a laptop case. "I'm a retired nurse midwife," Eleanor explained, setting down her bag. "This is my son, Theo, IT security specialist." "How did you find us?" Michael asked, still wary. Eleanor nodded toward Sarah's phone on the table. "Your last communication included GPS data. Sloppy, but fortunate in this case." Her tone softened as she approached Sarah. "Let's check you and the little one first, then talk." While Eleanor examined Sarah in the bedroom, Theo set up his equipment at the kitchen table. "Your credit card left a trail from Millfield to the gas station in Riverdale," he informed Michael, "and your sedan was reported abandoned at the bus terminal." "How bad is it?" "Your friend Victor is resourceful," Theo replied grimly. "He's got law enforcement contacts in 3 states looking for you. Technically, you're harboring a missing person, his pregnant wife." "She left voluntarily," Michael protested. "That's not the story being circulated." Theo turned his laptop to show Michael a news article. "Pregnant woman, abducted by accountant. Husband pleads for safe return." Michael sank into a chair. "He's turned it completely around." "Men like him usually do," Eleanor said, emerging from the bedroom. "Sarah's okay. Baby's heart rate is strong. The contractions were indeed Braxton Hicks, but she needs rest and proper nutrition." She joined them at the table, eyes moving to the photo album. "Gerald Hammond," she murmured, touching a picture. "I knew him." Michael looked up, surprised. "Small community up here," Eleanor explained. "I treated Emily during her cancer. Gerald and I were friends afterward." Her expression grew distant. "He helped me leave my husband. Gave me this." She pushed up her sleeve to reveal an old scar on her forearm. "Robert gave me this," among other souvenirs. You were in Sarah's position 30 years ago, without the pregnancy but with plenty of bruises. Eleanor's direct gaze held Michael's. Gerald didn't ask questions, just offered this cabin for 3 weeks while I got my bearings. The connection stunned Michael. Karen never mentioned. Gerald was discreet. It's why I recognized the address when Sarah sent her coordinates. Eleanor opened her medical bag. This place has been a safe house before. It can be again. Theo looked up from his laptop. We need to scrub your digital footprints. Disable Sarah's phone completely. Cash only from now on. And we need a better exit strategy, Eleanor added. Victor Miller isn't going to give up easily. Sarah appeared in the doorway, looking stronger. What are our options? Eleanor outlined. The possibilities. A women's shelter in Vermont with excellent security, a network of safe houses across the Canadian border, or a more permanent relocation program that could provide new identities. But first, Eleanor said firmly, we need to make sure you deliver a healthy baby. Everything else comes after that. As they talked, Michael found himself returning to the photo album, to the image of Gerald Hammond, the man he'd dismissed as paranoid and difficult. A man who, it seemed, had created not just a cabin, but a sanctuary. Perhaps Michael had misjudged him. Perhaps there were different kinds of strength than he had recognized. The police badge gleamed under the diner's fluorescent lights as Victor slid it across the table. Officer Ryan Mercer glanced at it, then back at Victor unimpressed. CBP jurisdiction doesn't extend to domestic disputes, Miller, Mercer said, stirring his coffee. Officially, I can't help. This isn't official, Victor replied, his voice measured despite the rage simmering beneath. This is a favor, colleague to colleague. 3 days since the grocery store sighting, 3 days of methodically tracking Michael Davidson's digital footprint, credit card at a gas station, an ATM withdrawal in Riverdale, then nothing. The trail had gone cold. Your pregnant wife, Mercer mused, taken by her accountant. He didn't bother hiding his skepticism. Victor leaned forward. Sarah's mentally unstable, has been since her mother died. The pregnancy hormones made it worse. The lie flowed smoothly. Davidson was doing our taxes, became fixated on her. When I confronted him, he manipulated her into leaving. Mercer's expression remained dubious. And the bruises her colleague reported. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Sarah bruises easily, always has, and she's clumsy, especially now. He tapped the badge. I've served with distinction for 12 years. You really think I'd hurt my own pregnant wife? The local officer sighed, sliding the badge back. What exactly do you need? Davidson made a call to someone named Eleanor Whitman the day they disappeared. I need her address. Mercer hesitated. That would require access to phone records without a warrant. Victor placed an envelope on the table. For your kid's college fund. 20 minutes later, they sat in Mercer's patrol car outside a small house on the edge of town. Eleanor Whitman, 64, retired nurse midwife, Mercer read from his laptop. No criminal record, widowed. He scrolled further. Owns property up in the mountains, inherited from her husband. Address, Victor asked sharply. Technically, I've already crossed several lines here, Miller. Victor's hand moved to his ankle holster. My wife and unborn child are out there, possibly in danger. How would you feel if it was your family? Mercer held Victor's gaze for a long moment, then turned back to his laptop. County Road 27, then unmarked Forest Service Road FR 118. He scribbled on a notepad. About 2 hours from here, but it's remote. No guarantee they're there. I'll take my chances. As Victor drove the winding mountain roads, his phone rang. Ramirez from Millfield PD. Got something on Davidson, Ramirez reported. His ex-wife's father owned a cabin near Riverdale, property transferred to Karen Davidson after his death. Victor's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Address? Working on it. County records are slow, but here's the interesting part. Karen's maiden name was Hammond. And guess who Gerald Hammond was friends with before he died? Eleanor Whitman, Victor stated flatly. Bingo. How'd you know? Just connecting dots. Victor ended the call, a cold smile forming. Two separate trails, leading to the same remote location. Confirmation. At a scenic overlook, Victor pulled over to prepare. He checked his service weapon, then the hunting knife. From the glove compartment, he retrieved a small tracking device. Standard CBP equipment for surveillance operations, officially logged out for a non-existent border case. The rain had returned, making the final stretch of road treacherous. Victor navigated carefully, headlights off for the last mile. Half a kilometer from Whitman's property, he parked behind a stand of pines and continued on foot. The cabin came into view. Lights burning despite the early hour, a Subaru parked outside that matched the description of the vehicle spotted leaving the bus terminal. Victor circled the perimeter, counting occupants through windows. 4 people, Sarah, Davidson, an older woman, and a younger man. Victor retreated to observe from a distance. Patience had always been his strength. At the border, he could wait hours for smugglers to make a mistake. This was no different. Midday, the younger man emerged, setting up satellite equipment on the porch. Communications, probably bypassing traditional networks. Smart, but predictable. When the man returned inside, Victor approached, attaching the tracking device beneath the Subaru's rear bumper. A movement at the window caught his attention. Sarah, her hand resting on her swollen belly as she talked with the older woman. The sight triggered a possessive fury that threatened his careful control. That was his child, his wife, his family. By late afternoon, Victor had formulated his plan. The older woman and younger man would leave eventually. Supplies would be needed, communications maintained. He would wait, following when they departed, then return for Sarah. As dusk fell, his patience was rewarded. The Subaru's engine started, and the older woman and younger man emerged. Victor watched as they drove away, then gave them a 15-minute head start before following. At the junction with the main road, Victor made a decision, abandoning the tail to circle back to the cabin. Davidson and Sarah would be alone now, vulnerable. Night had fully descended as Victor approached the cabin a second time. Through the window, he could see them at the kitchen table. Sarah laughing at something Davidson said, the accountant looking at her with undisguised affection. The sight crystallized Victor's rage into something cold and precise. Sarah had never laughed that way with him, not in years. Victor checked his weapons one final time, then moved toward the cabin door, badge in hand, his passport to anywhere. His license to reclaim what belonged to him. The support group pamphlet lay open on the kitchen table, its worn edges suggesting frequent handling. The survivors together breaking the cycle, read the simple text beside a logo of interlinked hands. Eleanor had left it behind deliberately. Contact information for an underground network larger than Michael had imagined. There are dozens of safe houses across the country, Sarah explained, tracing the address list with her finger. Some temporary, some permanent, all run by people who've been there. Michael studied the pamphlet with growing amazement. How long has this existed? Decades in some form. It started informal, just women helping other women escape. Now it's organized with legal support, medical care, even career placement. Sarah's voice held newfound strength. Eleanor says they can help me disappear completely. New identity, new state, new beginning. The prospect filled Michael with conflicting emotions, relief for Sarah's safety, and an unexpected hollowness at the thought of her permanent departure. When would you go? He asked, keeping his tone neutral. That's what I wanted to talk about. Sarah met his eyes directly. I'm not going. What? Sarah, Victor won't stop. I know. She squared her shoulders. That's precisely why I can't just vanish. He would never stop looking. And the next woman he finds, the next Sarah, might not have someone like you to help her. Before Michael could respond, the burner phone Eleanor had left them rang. Sarah answered, her expression shifting from concern to relief as she listened. "They're on their way back," she reported after hanging up. "And they're bringing company." An hour later, the cabin was transformed. Where there had been isolation, now there was activity. Purposeful, organized, determined. 3 women and 2 men had arrived with Eleanor and Theo, each with their own story of escape, each now part of the network. Maria, a former prosecutor who had fled an abusive judge husband, spread legal documents across the table. "We've been building a case file on Victor Miller for months," she explained. "Your situation isn't isolated. There have been others." Michael's surprise must have shown on his face. "Men like Victor rarely stop at one victim," Maria continued. 2 other women came forward after leaving him, both too frightened to press charges, but they provided statements. Lisa, a computer specialist with a still healing scar along her jawline, worked alongside Theo on laptops. "We're documenting everything: Victor's abuse patterns, his misuse of law enforcement resources, the false missing persons report." The 3rd woman, Denise, was a social worker who specialized in helping children of abuse. She sat with Sarah, discussing options for the baby's future. "We can ensure Victor never gets custody," she assured her. "But it requires courage. Your testimony will be essential." The men, James, a former police officer now working in private security, and Carlos, a lawyer specializing in protective orders, consulted maps of the area. Discussing security protocols. "We need to move you both to a safer location," James advised. "This cabin is compromised." "How?" Michael asked. "Victor likely tracked Eleanor's vehicle," James explained grimly. "Standard procedure for someone with his training and resources." Michael absorbed this sobering assessment. "I thought we were hidden here." "No one stays hidden forever," Carlos said. "The question is whether you're ready when they find you." Sarah joined them, the pamphlet in her hand. "I want to fight," she announced to the group. "Not just run. Not anymore." The room fell silent. Eleanor was the first to respond. "That's not the safest option for you or your baby. The safest option is exposing Victor for what he is," Sarah countered. "Ensuring he can't use his badge to hurt anyone else." Maria nodded slowly. "It's possible. With enough evidence, enough witnesses." She looked at Michael. "But it would require both of you. Your testimony about the night in the alley, the threats, the pursuit, it corroborates her account." Michael felt the weight of all eyes upon him. This was no longer about simply helping Sarah escape. This was about standing publicly against Victor, against the system that protected men like him. "Count me in," he said, surprising himself with his certainty. James outlined the immediate plan: relocate to a safe house closer to the city, one with better security and medical facilities for Sarah. Build the legal case while maintaining safety. Prepare for Victor's inevitable discovery of their location. "We move at dawn," he concluded. As the group dispersed to prepare, Michael found himself alone with the support group pamphlet. The interlinked hands on its cover seemed to pulse with new meaning. Connections between strangers. Strength in solidarity. Sarah appeared beside him, her expression resolute, despite the exhaustion evident in her posture. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "It's not too late to back out?" Michael considered the question honestly. The accountant who had spent decades avoiding conflict, seeking the path of least resistance, had already disappeared, replaced by someone he barely recognized, but somehow had always been. "I'm sure," he replied, closing the pamphlet. "Some things are worth fighting for." Outside, the night deepened, and somewhere in the darkness, Victor Miller continued his relentless approach, unaware that the solitary prey he tracked had become part of something much larger, much stronger than he could have anticipated. The voice recorder sat in the center of the table, small but potent, a simple device with the power to destroy lives or save them. Sarah touched it tentatively, her fingers tracing the smooth plastic as Maria outlined their strategy. "We need Victor on record," the former prosecutor explained, "admitting the abuse, making threats, Anything that contradicts his public story about a concerned husband searching for his abducted wife. They had relocated to a renovated farmhouse on the outskirts of Bridgewater, a property owned by the network under a corporate name. The security systems were discreet but comprehensive. Motion sensors, reinforced doors, panic buttons in every room. James monitored the perimeter while Carlos finalized legal preparations. "You want Sarah to confront him," Michael said, the words tasting bitter. "To put herself directly in his path." "Controlled confrontation," Maria corrected. "In a public setting with backup nearby. We record everything, then immediately file for an emergency protective order with irrefutable evidence." Sarah picked up the recorder, turning it over in her hands. "And if he doesn't incriminate himself?" "Men like Victor can't help themselves," Eleanor said quietly. "When challenged, especially by someone they consider their property, they reveal their true nature." Michael shook his head firmly. "It's too dangerous. Sarah is 7 months pregnant, which is precisely why we need to act now," Denise interjected. "Once the baby arrives, Victor will have parental rights to petition for. The courts still favor biological fathers, even with history of domestic violence." Sarah set the recorder down decisively. "I'll do it." "Sarah, it's my decision, Michael." Her voice was gentle but resolute. "I lived in fear for years, believing I had no power, no choice. I'm done with that." The planning continued through the afternoon, selecting the location, a busy coffee shop downtown, positioning backup, James and Carlos at separate tables, establishing emergency protocols. Sarah would initiate contact, suggesting a meeting to discuss their future. The recorder would capture everything. "Remember," Maria coached, "we need specific statements. Admissions of past violence, threats about what he'll do if you don't return. Anything that reveals control or coercion." "I know what buttons to push," Sarah replied grimly. As the others dispersed to prepare, Michael followed Sarah to the sunroom, where she stood gazing out at the autumn landscape. "There has to be another way," he said quietly. Sarah turned to face him, her expression weary but determined. "If it were just me, maybe I'd run. Disappear into the network, start over somewhere new." Her hand rested protectively on her belly. "But this baby deserves better than a life of looking over our shoulders. And the next woman Victor targets deserves warning." "Let me do it," Michael suggested suddenly. "I could wear the recorder, confront him about what I saw. He'd never incriminate himself to you. You're not his possession to control." Sarah's hand found his. "This is my fight, Michael. Has been since the first time I let him convince me his anger was my fault." Michael recognized the determination in her eyes, the same quiet strength that had allowed her to survive, to plan escapes, to protect her unborn child. The strength he had first glimpsed in that rain-soaked alley. "At least let me be there. At the coffee shop," he pleaded. Sarah shook her head. "Victor would recognize you instantly. It would change the dynamic, make him defensive rather than revealing." She squeezed his hand. "I need you to trust me. I can do this." That evening, they rehearsed scenarios, Sarah practicing responses that would elicit incriminating statements without escalating danger. The recorder was tested repeatedly, its range and clarity verified. "The meeting is set for noon tomorrow," Sarah announced, reading Victor's eager reply to her carefully crafted text. "He thinks I'm considering coming home." As the others finalized tactical details, Michael retreated to the porch, the night air cool against his face. Eleanor joined him, her experienced eyes noting his distress. "This is how it happens," she said simply. "Our cycles break. Someone stands up and says enough. And if it goes wrong?" Eleanor's gaze was steady. "Then we adapt. We protect. We continue." She nodded toward the house. "But that woman in there, she's stronger than Victor knows. Stronger than perhaps she knows herself." Michael thought about the Sarah he had first met, frightened, trapped, desperate. The transformation was remarkable and humbling. "The hardest part for people like us," Eleanor continued, "is learning that sometimes supporting someone means letting them fight their own battles. Being ready to help, but not taking over." Michael recognized the truth in her words. His instinct to protect Sarah had evolved into something deeper: respect for her courage, her determination to reclaim her life. Inside, the voice recorder waited on the table, small, unassuming, pivotal. Tomorrow, it would capture words that could change everything if they were careful. If they were lucky. If Victor made the mistake of revealing his true self, believing he was finally regaining control. The broken cell phone lay in pieces on the pavement, its screen shattered beyond repair, like their carefully constructed plan. Sarah stared at it, her breath coming in short gasps as Victor's grip tightened around her wrist. "Did you really think I wouldn't know?" he hissed, his public mask of concern replaced by cold fury now that they were alone in the coffee shop's back alley. "That I wouldn't recognize a setup?" Everything had unraveled so quickly. The meeting had started according to plan. Sarah arriving early, the recorder hidden in her purse, James and Carlos positioned at separate tables. Victor had entered precisely at noon, his expression a perfect blend of relief and concern for the benefit of onlookers. Then he had leaned close, whispering, "Let's talk outside. Too many ears in here." His eyes had flicked meaningfully toward James, then Carlos. "Including your new friends." Sarah had tried to resist, to keep him in the public space as planned. But Victor's hand on her elbow, ostensibly supportive of his pregnant wife, had been steel beneath the solicitous gesture. "Now, Sarah," he had murmured, "unless you want me to create a scene about how your abductor might still be watching us." In the alley, his first move had been to take her purse, dumping its contents. The recorder had clattered to the pavement, followed immediately by the smashed remains of the phone James had given her for emergency communication. "Who else knows you're here?" Victor demanded, backing her against the brick wall. "The accountant? That interfering old woman?" Sarah fought to control her rising panic. The baby shifted inside her, responding to her elevated heart rate. She needed to remain calm, to think. "No one," she lied. "I came alone. I wanted to talk to you, to explain your betrayal." Victor's voice was dangerously soft. "How you made me look like a fool, filing police reports, giving interviews about my missing wife." Inside the coffee shop, James would be wondering why she hadn't returned. The protocol was clear. If communication was lost for more than 5 minutes, they would initiate the backup plan. But that assumed they knew where she was. "Victor, please," Sarah said, one hand protectively covering her belly. "Think about our baby." Something flickered across his face, a complex emotion Sarah couldn't interpret. His grip on her wrist loosened fractionally. "That's why I'm here," he said, his tone modulating to something almost reasonable. "Our family belongs together. I've arranged everything, a transfer to North Dakota, fresh start, just like we discussed." Sarah saw her opening, a chance to redirect, to regain control of the situation. "I was afraid," she admitted, infusing her voice with calculated vulnerability. "After what happened in the alley, you mean when you tried to leave me?" The dangerous edge returned to Victor's voice. "When that interfering old man stuck his nose where it didn't belong?" "You hurt me," Sarah said quietly. "Not for the first time." Victor's expression hardened. "I disciplined you. There's a difference." His free hand moved to her face, fingers tracing the faded bruise on her cheekbone with disturbing gentleness. "You've always needed a firm hand, Sarah. It's why you fell apart after your mother died. No guidance, no structure. The perverse logic was familiar, Victor's twisted worldview that cast his control as protection, his violence as necessary correction. Suddenly, Sarah felt it, a sharp contraction that took her breath away. Different from the Braxton Hicks she had experienced before. Stronger, more purposeful. "Victor," she gasped, doubling over as much as his grip would allow. "Something's wrong with the baby." For an instant, genuine concern replaced rage in his eyes. Then suspicion returned. "Another trick? Like your little recording device." Another contraction seized her stronger than the first. "No trick this time. The baby's coming," she managed. "It's too early." Victor hesitated, clearly calculating risks and options. If she delivered now, at barely 7 months, medical intervention would be necessary. Records, witnesses, questions. We'll go to the clinic in Millfield, he decided, shifting his grip to her shoulders. Dr. Reynolds owes me a favor. He'll keep things quiet. No, Sarah protested, feeling liquid warmth between her legs. The nearest hospital now. Victor's phone rang, his work ringtone. He checked it with irritation, then surprise crossed his face. Miller, he answered curtly. While he was momentarily distracted, Sarah reached into her jacket pocket. Pressing the panic button Eleanor had insisted she carry, a simple device that would send GPS coordinates to the entire team. Now, Victor was saying into the phone, clearly displeased. I'm in the middle of... He paused, listening. How much are we talking about? Another pause. Fine, give me 20 minutes. He ended the call, frustration evident. Change of plans. Work emergency. His eyes narrowed. You're coming with me. Victor, the baby, can wait. His grip turned bruising again. 1 hour, then we'll get you checked out. As he pulled her toward his unmarked patrol car, another contraction hit, stronger, unmistakable. Sarah's knees buckled. Please, she gasped, genuine fear replacing strategic compliance. Something's really wrong. Indecision crossed Victor's face, and in that moment Sarah heard it, the distant wail of approaching sirens. The backup plan activated at last. Victor heard it too. His expression hardened into something cold and determined as he yanked Sarah toward his vehicle with renewed urgency. You did this, he hissed. You'll regret it. The broken phone remained on the pavement behind them, its shattered screen reflecting the sky above. Their carefully constructed plan in pieces, the aftermath unknown, the danger only escalating. The hospital bracelet encircled Sarah's wrist, white plastic, name and patient number clearly displayed. A symbol of protection, of being within a system that might shield her from Victor. Might. BP's elevated 150/95, the nurse reported, removing the cuff. Fetal heartbeat showing some distress. Dr. Winters, a woman in her 50s, with calm efficiency in every movement, nodded. Let's start magnesium sulfate for the preeclampsia and prepare for a possible emergency C-section. Sarah gripped the bed rails as another contraction seized her. It's too early, she gasped. Only 31 weeks. We'll do everything we can to stop the labor, Dr. Winters assured her. The magnesium should help with that as well. In the hallway, voices rose, one familiar and insistent. I'm her husband. You can't keep me out. Victor had followed the ambulance after James and Carlos intercepted them outside the coffee shop. The confrontation had been brief but intense, Victor producing his badge, claiming jurisdiction over his mentally unstable pregnant wife. Only Sarah's obvious medical distress had prevented him from forcing her into his vehicle. Now, at Bridgewater Memorial, Victor was attempting to leverage his authority once more. Sir, hospital policy requires... A security guard's voice, firm but diplomatic. Check her admission forms. I'm listed as next of kin. Victor's tone shifted to concerned husband. Please, I need to be with her. Sarah turned desperate eyes to the nurse. Don't let him in. He's the one who... Another contraction cut her words short, sharper than the last. The nurse exchanged glances with Dr. Winters, who stepped closer. Ms. Miller, is there something we should know about your husband? Before Sarah could respond, the door opened. Victor entered, badge prominently displayed, his expression a perfect mask of husbandly concern. Sarah, thank God. He moved to her bedside, taking her hand in a grip that appeared loving, but felt like a vice. I've been so worried. Dr. Winters observed the interaction closely. Mr. Miller, I'm Dr. Winters. Your wife is experiencing premature labor complicated by preeclampsia. We need to stabilize her blood pressure immediately. Victor nodded, the picture of a concerned spouse. Whatever she needs, doctor. Just tell me how I can help, perhaps by explaining the bruises on her wrists. Dr. Winter suggested, her tone neutral but her gaze direct. Victor didn't miss a beat. Sarah's been staying with some questionable people since she left home. I've been worried sick about her safety. He lowered his voice conspiratorially. She hasn't been herself since the pregnancy. Mood swings, paranoia. That's not true, Sarah protested, another contraction stealing her breath. He's lying. He's the one who— Shh, sweetheart, don't upset yourself, Victor soothed, his fingers tightening imperceptibly around hers. To the doctor he added, "The stress isn't good for her or the baby." Dr. Winter's expression remained professionally neutral. "I need to examine my patient. Would you mind stepping outside, Mr. Miller?" Victor hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Of course. I'll be right outside if you need me, Sarah." His eyes held a warning only she could recognize. The moment the door closed, Sarah grasped Dr. Winter's arm. "Please help me. He's abusive. He'll take my baby." "Slow down," the doctor counseled, checking the fetal monitor with concern. "Your blood pressure's spiking again. I need you to stay calm for the baby's sake." "You don't understand," Sarah insisted. "He has connections in law enforcement. Once the baby's born, he'll find a way to take custody." Dr. Winter's expression softened slightly. "I understand more than you might think. Hospital policy mandates reporting suspected domestic abuse. We have protocols." Hope flared briefly in Sarah's chest, then faltered. "Victor will talk his way out of it. He always does." A commotion in the hallway drew their attention, raised voices, then what sounded like Michael's distinctive tone. "I'm her emergency contact. Check her paperwork." The door burst open again, but this time it was Eleanor who entered. Her silver hair disheveled, but her expression resolute. "I'm her midwife," she announced to Dr. Winters. "And I have documentation you need to see immediately." She produced a thumb drive and a folder of papers. "Medical power of attorney signed and notarized last week. Sarah's husband is specifically excluded from medical decisions." Dr. Winters accepted the documents, scanning them quickly. "These appear to be in order, but hospital legal will need to verify." "Of course," Eleanor agreed. "In the meantime, perhaps security could ensure Mr. Miller remains outside until this is resolved." Dr. Winters hesitated only briefly before nodding to the nurse, who stepped into the hallway. Moments later, Victor's protests became more distant. "Michael?" Sarah asked weakly. "Talking to hospital administration," Eleanor explained, taking Sarah's hand. "James is with him. Carlos is contacting the judge who signed your restraining order." The hospital bracelet felt suddenly more substantial on Sarah's wrist, a tangible connection to safety, to protocol, to protection under a system that might, just might, work in her favor this time. Another contraction seized her, and the monitors began to alarm. "Baby's heart rate is dropping," the nurse reported urgently. Dr. Winters made an immediate decision. "Prep or two, we need to deliver now." As they wheeled Sarah toward the elevator, she caught a glimpse of Victor arguing with security in the lobby below. Their eyes met briefly through the glass partition, his filled with cold fury, hers with determination. The hospital bracelet remained on her wrist as they pushed through the operating room doors, a small circle of plastic that now represented her strongest hope. That institutions designed to protect actually would. The security camera mounted in the corner of the hospital corridor captured it all. Silent witness to the culmination of months of fear, days of planning and moments of desperate courage. Michael stared at the small red light, knowing everything that happened next would be documented. "Irrefutable. You need to leave, Mr. Miller," the security guard repeated, positioning himself between Victor and the elevator to the surgical floor. "Hospital administration is reviewing the restraining order." "That order is fraudulent," Victor insisted, badge still prominently displayed. "My wife is mentally unstable. The pregnancy has triggered severe paranoia." His voice carried the practiced authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Michael stood several feet back, James beside him. They had agreed to let hospital security handle the situation if possible. Any confrontation between Victor and Michael could be twisted into allegations of harassment, undermining Sarah's case, but Victor had spotted him. "You," he snarled, mask of concern slipping momentarily. "This is your doing." Michael remained silent, remembering Maria's coaching. "Don't engage. Let him reveal himself." Victor turned back to the guard. "That man manipulated my vulnerable wife, convinced her to leave her home while suffering pregnancy psychosis." His tone became confidential. He's obsessed with her. Check his background. He's been stalking her for months. The absurdity of the accusation might have been laughable in another context. Michael, the accountant who had spent decades avoiding conflict, cast as a manipulative predator. Yet Victor delivered the lie with such conviction that the guard's expression reflected uncertainty. "Sir," the guard addressed Michael, "perhaps you should wait downstairs while we sort this out." Before Michael could respond, Eleanor emerged from the elevator, her expression grim. "The baby's in distress. They're performing an emergency C-section." Victor immediately pushed forward. "I need to be there." "That's my child. The child you endangered," Eleanor countered sharply. "When you grabbed Sarah in that alley, when you forced her into your car, actions captured on the coffee shop's security cameras." Victor's expression hardened. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, old woman." "Actually, I do." Eleanor stood her ground. "A man who uses his badge to terrorize his wife, who calls in favors to track her across state lines, who manipulates the system meant to protect the vulnerable." The security guard looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, sir, please. This is a hospital." Victor changed tactics, his voice suddenly breaking with emotion. "My baby is being born. Whatever issues exist between my wife and me, I have a right to be present for my child's birth." The performance was masterful. The concerned father, momentarily overcoming personal grievances for the sake of his child. Michael saw the guard wavering. "Mr. Miller," came a new voice, Dr. Winters, emerging from the stairwell rather than the elevator. "A word, please." Victor straightened, composing himself. "Doctor, I insist on being present for—" "That won't be possible," Dr. Winters interrupted calmly. "Your wife has explicitly denied consent, and we have documentation supporting her decision." She gestured to a nearby consultation room. "However, I'd like to discuss something else with you. Something concerning—" Victor hesitated, then nodded stiffly. As he followed the doctor, his shoulder brushed Michael's, a deliberate contact. "This isn't over," he murmured, too quietly for others to hear. "When I'm done with you, you'll wish you'd minded your own business that night." The threat barely registered with Michael. His concern was entirely for Sarah and her baby, somewhere behind the surgical doors above. Inside the consultation room, Dr. Winters closed the door, but left it slightly ajar. Hospital protocol for potentially volatile situations. The security camera in the hallway had a clear view through the gap. "Mr. Miller," Dr. Winters began, "during our examination of your wife, we documented numerous concerning injuries, some recent, some older." Victor maintained his composure. "As I explained, Sarah has been staying with questionable people. I've been worried about her safety. These injuries are consistent with patterns we see in domestic abuse cases," Dr. Winters continued, her tone professional but direct. "Defensive bruising on the arms, finger mark bruises on the neck and wrists." Victor's expression darkened. "Are you accusing me of something, Doctor?" "I'm informing you that we've filed a mandatory report with social services." Dr. Winters met his gaze steadily. "It's hospital protocol." Victor leaned forward, voice lowered but intensity increasing. "Let me be clear. That report will disappear. My wife will be discharged into my care. My child will come home with me. That's not how this works, Mr. Miller. It's exactly how it works," Victor countered, his control slipping. "One call to the right people, and your report vanishes. Another call, and your medical license comes under review." Dr. Winters didn't flinch. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining reality," Victor replied, rising from his chair. "I've invested too much to let an interfering doctor, a delusional old woman, and a pathetic accountant take my family from me." The doctor's eyes flicked briefly toward the door, toward the security camera capturing every word. Victor followed her gaze, realization dawning too late. His expression contorted with fury. "You set me up," he snarled. In the hallway, Michael watched as hospital security responded to Dr. Winters' subtle gesture. As they entered the consultation room, Victor's controlled facade finally shattered completely, revealing, at last, the man Sarah had feared and fled. The security camera recorded it all, the threats, the rage, the mask fully dropped. Evidence that would finally make Victor Miller face consequences beyond the reach of his badge, his connections, his cultivated image of authority. The tiny infant footprint on the birth certificate was barely the size of a quarter, delicate, perfect, miraculous. Michael studied it in wonder as he sat beside Sarah's hospital bed where she cradled her newborn daughter. "Olivia Eleanor Miller," Sarah whispered, gently stroking the baby's cheek. At 4 pounds, 8 ounces, she was small but fierce, just like her mother. The NICU doctors had been amazed by her lung function, her grip strength, her determined spirit despite arriving 9 weeks early. "She's beautiful," Michael said, still marveling at how someone so tiny could represent such enormous change. For all of them, 3 days had passed since Victor's arrest, not for domestic violence, which remained difficult to prosecute, but for witness intimidation and abusing his official position, charges that his law enforcement connections couldn't easily dismiss. The security camera footage had captured what years of Sarah's suffering could not. Irrefutable evidence of who Victor Miller truly was beneath the carefully maintained facade. The restraining order was extended, Maria reported, entering the room with Eleanor. Permanent this time, covering both Sarah and Olivia. Sarah's eyes filled with grateful tears. "Thank you for everything." Eleanor moved to the bedside, her experienced hands adjusting the swaddling blanket with practiced ease. "The network will continue to provide support, legal advocacy, counseling, practical assistance." She smiled at the infant. "Little Olivia has quite the extended family already." A soft knock at the door drew their attention. A young woman stood hesitantly in the doorway, dark hair, familiar eyes that reflected Michael's own. "Ellie," Michael breathed, rising from his chair. His daughter shifted awkwardly. "Mom called. Said you were here. That you'd—" She trailed off, her gaze moving from Michael to Sarah to the tiny bundle. "That I'd what?" Michael prompted gently. "That you'd finally taken a stand about something." Ellie's voice held a complex mixture of emotions. Surprise, confusion, perhaps a hint of pride. "That you were helping someone who needed it, even though it was dangerous." Michael felt a tightness in his throat. 2 years of silence between them, broken by this unexpected moment. "I'm glad you came," he managed. Ellie stepped fully into the room, her posture uncertain but determined. So like Michael himself. "Mom said you've been staying at Grandpa Hammond's cabin." "The one you always hated." A small smile touched Michael's lips. "It grew on me." Eleanor tactfully suggested that Maria accompany her to the cafeteria, leaving the fragile family reunion some privacy. As they departed, Ellie moved closer to the bed, curiosity overcoming awkwardness. "She's so tiny," she observed, looking at Olivia. "But strong," Sarah replied. "The doctors say she'll be fine. We can probably take her home in a couple of weeks." The word home hung in the air, its meaning suddenly uncertain. "Where will you go?" Ellie asked, the question directed at both of them. Sarah and Michael exchanged glances. They hadn't discussed it. Events had moved too quickly, from the failed recording attempt to Victor's arrest to Olivia's premature arrival. "I have options through the network," Sarah said carefully. "Safe houses, relocation assistance, or," Michael began, surprising himself, "we've discussed the possibility of my renovating the cabin, making it more suitable for year-round living. It's remote but secure. And it already has a history of sheltering people who need safety. We've discussed that." Sarah asked, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Well, I've thought about it," Michael amended. "A lot." The realization that he had been making plans, envisioning a future that included Sarah and Olivia, struck him with sudden clarity. Somewhere between that rainy night in the alley and this hospital room, his carefully ordered life had transformed into something unrecognizable, but infinitely more meaningful. Ellie studied her father with newfound curiosity. "You hate the woods. You complained about the bugs every time we went." "People change," Michael replied simply. A small sound from Olivia drew their attention. Her tiny fist had escaped the swaddling, fingers flexing in the hospital light. "May I?" Ellie asked hesitantly. Sarah nodded, carefully transferring the bundle to Michael's daughter. Ellie cradled the infant with natural ease, her expression softening as Olivia's fingers curled around her own. "She has your eyes," Ellie told Sarah. Then, with a glance at her father and his stubbornness, "I bet." The unexpected joke broke the remaining tension. For the first time in years, Michael heard his daughter's genuine laugh, a sound he had missed more than he had allowed himself to acknowledge, as they sat together, an unconventional constellation of lives brought together by circumstance and choice. Michael recognized the profound truth in Eleanor's words days earlier. This is how cycles break. This is how healing begins. Outside the hospital window, spring sunlight filtered through new leaves, nature's own testament to rebirth, to second chances, to life's persistent emergence even after the harshest seasons. The tiny footprint on the birth certificate marked not just Olivia's arrival into the world, but the first step on a new path for all of them. The house keys jingled in Sarah's hand as she stood on the porch, taking in the view of the lake beyond the newly built deck. 6 months had transformed the rustic cabin into a proper home. Insulated walls, expanded kitchen, nursery painted in soft yellows and greens. The renovations had given Michael purpose during the legal proceedings, a tangible way to build something positive amid the painful testimonies and court appearances. "What do you think?" Michael asked, coming to stand beside her. "Eleanor and James just left. Said they'd be back next weekend to help with the garden." Sarah smiled, watching Olivia sleep peacefully in the portable bassinet. At 8 months old, though developmentally closer to 6, accounting for her premature birth, she was thriving. Dark curls framed a face that grew more expressive each day. "I think it's perfect," Sarah said, the keys warm in her palm. "I never thought I'd have this again. A home that feels safe." The keys represented more than just access to the cabin. They symbolized independence, choice, security, concepts that had seemed impossible during her years with Victor. His trial had concluded 3 months earlier. Guilty on charges of witness intimidation, misuse of government authority, and obstruction of justice. The domestic violence charges had been more difficult to prove, but the other convictions carried enough weight to ensure he would serve significant time. More importantly, the restraining order was permanent, and Victor's parental rights had been terminated based on the evidence presented. "Ellie called," Michael said, settling into one of the Adirondack chairs. "She's coming for dinner tomorrow, bringing that boy she's been seeing." "Daniel," Sarah supplied, smiling at Michael's deliberate forgetfulness. "You might try using his name if you want her to keep visiting." Michael's reconciliation with his daughter had been gradual but steady. Weekend visits evolving into regular family dinners, stilted conversations giving way to genuine connections. Ellie had even begun bringing Daniel, a soft-spoken engineering student she'd met at college. "She mentioned something else," Michael continued, his tone deliberately casual. "The elementary school in Bridgewater is looking for a kindergarten teacher, starting next fall." Sarah glanced at him sharply. How did she know I was considering teaching again? "I might have mentioned it." Michael looked slightly embarrassed when she asked about our plans. "Our plans," Sarah echoed, the phrase still new enough to give her pause. In the months since Olivia's birth, she and Michael had developed a relationship neither had anticipated, built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and a depth of understanding that only their unique journey could have created. They hadn't rushed anything. Sarah had initially stayed in a network safe house while the legal proceedings continued, bringing Olivia for regular visits to the cabin. The decision to move in had come gradually, pragmatically at first. The remote location provided security, the renovated space offered comfort, the support system they had built remained close by. The emotional aspect had evolved naturally, without pressure. They were both healing, both learning to trust again in different ways. "Eleanor says the support group has 3 new families," Sarah said, changing the subject. 2 with children, The network had expanded, strengthened by the publicity surrounding Victor's case. What had begun as an underground railroad for domestic violence survivors had gained legitimacy, funding, political support. Maria mentioned they're using the security camera footage in training sessions for hospital staff, Michael added, teaching them to recognize the signs, to create safe documentation. Olivia stirred, tiny fists stretching upward. Sarah lifted her, breathing in the baby powder scent of her daughter's skin. Sometimes the simple fact of her existence, healthy, thriving, safe, seemed miraculous. I think I will apply for that teaching position, she decided. It's time. Michael nodded, understanding the significance of the decision. Teaching had been Sarah's passion before Victor gradually isolated her from her career, her colleagues, her purpose. You'll be wonderful, he said simply. As evening approached, they moved inside. The cabin retained elements of its original character, the stone fireplace, the exposed beams, while incorporating the comforts and security features they needed. Michael had thrown himself into the renovations, discovering unexpected satisfaction in physical labor after decades behind a desk. He had officially retired from the accounting firm, using his savings to fund the renovations and to establish a small foundation supporting the network's legal defense fund. His former colleagues had been bewildered by the transformation of the quiet, predictable Michael Davidson into someone who testified in court, who renovated cabins, who helped establish safe houses. Sarah watched him prepare dinner, Olivia content in her arms. The house keys sat on the counter beside her, simple metal objects representing a journey neither of them could have imagined that rainy night in the alley. "What?" Michael asked, noticing her gaze. "Just thinking about how life changes," Sarah replied. "How people change." Outside, the last light of day gleamed on the lake's surface. Inside, warmth and safety surrounded them, not just in the physical structure they had built, but in the bonds they had formed, the community they had joined, the family they had become. The keys caught the lamplight, throwing small reflections across the kitchen wall, tiny beacons of possibility, of doors unlocked, of paths forward neither had dared to imagine before a moment of courage in a rain-soaked alley changed everything.